What is your relationship with Hank? Like, is he just a guy who you see and you're like, hello, Hank Green?
I don't know. He's just Hank. I just talk to him.
I want John Green to look me in the eyes and I want to be like, you know how it was like fucked up that Tumblr was all about you and then created a narrative that you're somehow a bad man? Isn't
Have
that
you
crazy?
Did you see I think posted something on Tumblr recently, or it might have been on Twitter. I don't know what it was, but it was about like Tumblr having become the good place.
Yeah.
And it was just very fun that it was coming from John, who was notoriously and infamously bullied off of Tumblr. He had such a good Tumblr name too. Fishing Bro Proceeds was such a good, what do we call them on Tumblr? Handles? Usernames?
Yeah, I think just like, yeah, I don't remember.
This is like when I talk about Blue Sky, and I'm like, you know, when you tweet on Blue Sky, what do we call them? Do we call them Blueies?
That's where I think Blue Sky feels like a fake social media platform. Like, it feels like, when you're watching a sitcom and a character is like, oh, I'm using Twangle, and it's just like a fake interface. That's what Blue Sky feels like to me.
I kind of like Blue Sky. It feels
I
like what
do
it was like to be on Twitter at the beginning.
a little bit. I reminisce about the early days of Twitter. Twitter used to be a respectable social media website back in my America.
Back when it was my America and not
Whatever we live in now.
whatever we
So
live in now. It seems to me that all you see is violence in movies and sex on TV. So where are those good old-fashioned values on which we used to rely?
well, lucky for you, there's a podcast where we talk about it. Welcome to Informed Attraction.
Hosted by two live studio ostriches. I'm Mackenna Goodrich.
I'm Dr. Aubrey Hoffer.
I forgot about the live studio ostrich bit until I was rewatching Family Guy for this episode.
I vaguely remember that bit.
It's basically every time they talk about, like, instead of like a live studio audience, they have a live studio ostrich who they cut to.
There are some Family Guy bits where when it's not anything that's like racially or sexually or horribly motivated are just funny.
Informed Attraction is a podcast where we talk about the ways in which the media has informed the way we view ourselves and others in regards to beauty, attraction, and all sorts of other things. If it wasn't obvious, today we're going to be talking about the television program Family Guy.
I watch a lot of Family Guy. It's part of what happens when you have a husband.
I literally have that in mind. I was like, Aubrey watches more Family Guy than me because, to quote her, it's part of having a husband.
It is. It's just part of having a husband is sometimes when you're eating your little LNS, that stands for late night snack, you eat your little snack and you have Family Guy on TV.
So for those who don't know, Family Guy is an American animated sitcom created by Seth MacFarland that debuted on Fox on January 31st, 1999. The show follows the dysfunctional Griffin family, Peter, Lois, Meg, Chris, Stewie, and their talking dog, Brian, living in the fictional town of, I'm going to be so nervous every time I say the name of the town, Quahog.
Yeah, Quahog.
I know it's Quahog, but it's the reading the QA and then having to say Quahog really messes my brain up.
You're a fake Family Guy fan.
No, I just have processing issues, okay? Living in the fictional town of Quahog, Rhode Island. The series was conceived after MacFarlane's earlier work, The Life of Larry and Steve, with Peter and Brian evolving from the original characters of Larry and Steve.
Have you watched those?
No, I have not.
I have, on YouTube.
Did you like them?
It feels like a Hanna-Barbera cartoon. It's really interesting because Seth MacFarlane, I think he worked on like Johnny Bravo and shows like that. And it definitely has a lot of inspiration from like stuff like the Flintstones and stuff. But yeah, the Larry and Steve shorts that you can watch on YouTube, it feels like a classic like Hanna-Barbera or Warner Brothers cartoon where it's literally like, old man is driving the car and then he's not paying attention and his dog is freaking out and they avert disasters and blah blah blah. It's really not, it doesn't feel like Family Guy at all. And then there's another one which I think is more in the Family Guy vein that I want to say was for like a class project, or maybe it was like his like senior thesis or something, and that's where it's like they're watching Star Trek, and they basically do the Star Trek gag that is then done in Family Guy later.
Yeah, so that's why there's like two distinct things, which are The Life of Larry and then Larry and Steve. Larry and Steve is the one more Hanna-Barbera one, and then The Life of Larry was his thesis project at RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design. So that was his thesis project. And then he worked for Hanna-Barbera, where he worked on Johnny Bravo, Dexter's Laboratory, which you're gonna tell me that Stewie Griffin didn't come a little bit from Dexter? You're gonna tell me that Stewie Griffin didn't come a little bit from Dexter? And Cow and Chicken, which I didn't remember.
I love Cow and Chicken.
Oh, now I'm looking at images and I kind of vaguely remember this.
I remember they had a little devil guy in Cow and Chicken, and you could see his butt.
Yeah. Now that I'm seeing, when I just saw the name Cow and Chicken, I was like, what is this? And then I remember they had another segment called I Am Weasel, which I remember too.
Oh, I remember that too.
Yeah. Were you a Boomerang kid? I was a Boomerang kid.
I was a big Boomerang kid.
Yeah. Okay, so after its initial cancellation...
That's what makes me wonder, do you, so, I was at the grocery store the other day, and I saw, Fruity Pebbles and Cocoa Pebbles. It's there hasn't been, Flintstones media out in the world pretty much, in my lifetime. So I'm when little kids see, Fruity Pebbles and Cocoa Pebbles now, do they understand that those are, cartoon characters? Or do they just think of them as cereal mascots? Also, why isn't there, a Flint... I would think somebody would have tried to revamp, the Flintstones or the Jetsons at some point. Because when I was a kid, they had, at least with the Flintstones, they had the live-action movies, which were kind of fun. I thought they were funny. But yeah, I have not seen...
There's been no Flintstones media released in the US, at least, since I think the latest date is 2001, and that was an old episode that got re-released. There hasn't been new media. Oh no. Yeah. The last time there was new media was released in 2001, and that was one of the live action movies. It was the Flintstones and Viva Rock Vegas.
I loved Viva Rock Vegas.
Yeah, that was the last new Flintstones media that was released.
Yeah, and I'm sure those movies tanked at the theaters, which is probably why they decided not to do anything with them. But it's interesting because they're still in the culture, but as cereal mascots, I guess.
Yeah. So probably if you're a little kid, you probably just think of them as the cereal mascots and not as the cartoon.
Yeah.
That was the same thing when I was thinking about do kids... I saw the Smurfs trailer recently and I was like, do kids still care about the Smurfs?
Yeah, do kids do they even know what a Smurf is?
Because I feel like the last Smurf movie before this new one with Rihanna came out when I was young.
Yeah, so. I vaguely recall there being a live action movie or maybe a 3D animated movie in what?
Yeah, it's 2011.
Okay, yeah, I remember that.
2013. Oh, there's one in 2017. Okay, they're doing a Smurfs movie every 4 years, basically.
Yeah, the Smurfs are still trying to be culturally relevant.
Fascinating. Aubrey?
Yeah?
A really important question for you.
Uh-huh.
Does Papa Smurf do it for you?
No, but there is a Smurf who does. Let me... let me see the Smurf characters. Which one did I like? I think I liked Brainy Smurf, because he's got glasses. Smurfette is super cute. There was one where I remember who was a more sensitive Smurf, who I was he's the cute one to me.
Oh, I typed in hot Smurf and that was a mistake. I typed in hot Smurf and that was a mistake. That was a mistake to type into google.com.
Which one did I like? I think there was maybe a poet Smurf who I liked, or maybe I want to say that I was just Brainy Smurf who I liked, because he was the nerd one. Maybe Grouchy Smurf. I don't remember though. But no, Papa Smurf didn't. But definitely, I do recall being fond of one of the Smurfs. I'm gonna have to revisit Smurf media at some point to try to recall who it was. I want to say it was Brainy.
Well, looking at the Smurfs characters website, we could at some point rank all 110 of the Smurfs in order. We could tier list the Smurfs.
All right, Patreon episode where we do a tier list of the Smurfs. Send in enough emails.
We keep saying Patreon as if we have one.
But if we get enough people who are invested in the Patreon content, that's how we get it.
Oh, okay. We gotta have it be the want of the people before we actually do it.
Yeah, if you guys email us enough times and say, I will pay money to watch you rank 110 Smurfs. Well, baby, we'll put a number on it.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to Family Guy now.
Okay.
After its initial cancellation following the third season in 2002, the show was revived in 2004 due to strong DVD sales and rerun popularity, with this fourth season airing in 2005. As of 2025, Family Guy is in its 23rd season. Family Guy has garnered both praise and controversy, earning a Primetime Emmy nomination for Outstanding Comedy Series in 2009. However, it has also faced criticism for its handling of sensitive topics, including race, gender, and sexuality. I will have lots of feelings about that in the coming parts of this episode. Family Guy has spawned spin-off media, including the Stewie Griffin Untold Story DVD, video games, and a Star Wars parody trilogy. You have the Stewie Griffin one?
We had both the video game and the Stewie Griffin best of DVD, which basically I think was literally just like a DVD with like 4 episodes that were like Stewie centric. And there's even an episode of Family Guy where they make fun of how shitty that DVD was.
And there was also a spin-off series, The Cleveland Show, that ran from 2009 to 2013. So genuinely one of the earliest episodes that I had for this podcast was an explanation of why Brian Griffin is the hottest man on Family Guy. And I feel like now, living in a post us dunking on Judy Hopps world, I do need to clarify that do I find myself physically attracted to Brian Griffin? No, that is a dog. And I have famously drawn a line in the sand about how I feel about being attracted to animals, even cartoon ones, except Spirit the horse. I, in fact, got in trouble this week because I implied that puppy play had anything to do with bestiality. I didn't get in trouble. I just got told it didn't. And I was like, well, it does to me because the masks, the masks.
Mackenna got wrecked in the group chat.
I did not get wrecked. I had to once again assert myself as being someone who is pro furry for others, but not for myself. However, I think there is supposed to be an allure, literally simply because that Brian's voice is just Seth MacFarlane's actual speaking voice. So Brian comes across as the most grounded, realistic character. Also, Seth MacFarlane has a really nice speaking voice.
Seth MacFarlane is also hot.
Yeah, Seth MacFarlane's also hot.
We're just gonna say it out loud. This is a Seth MacFarlane is hot truther podcast.
Yes. And I think that where I ultimately come to is, now that I've done all of this research for this episode, I think that Brian is Seth MacFarlane's self-insert character in Family Guy, which is why he is written to be the most attractive man, quotes, on the show, alongside with Joe.
I think that Brian does function as a Seth MacFarlane insert character. I don't know that it's because of that he's hot, or I don't think the intent was I'm gonna make the character who's me intentionally hot. I just think that, like you're saying, Brian is the grounded character with all of the ridiculousness. He's oftentimes the one who says something where you're like, okay, yeah, that's true. Or his flaws are flaws that we see in ourselves more so than with the other characters, which I think makes him more attractive. I think Seth MacFarlane is incredibly self-deprecating. I don't think Seth MacFarlane thinks he's hot.
Correct. This has in fact led to a running bit between Aubrey and I about how we would like to have him on the show to better understand him and ask him to his face if he knows he's hot, because we're not sure he knows.
No, I'm gonna look Seth MacFarlane dead in his fucking eyes, and I'm gonna go, so you're hot, right? And he's gonna laugh, he's gonna do a little, I don't know about that, and we're gonna go, no, you are an attractive man by conventional standards. And he's gonna go, I don't think that's true, because Seth MacFarlane was bullied when he was a kid. I know this. I was like,
I don't know that that's canonical knowledge, but Aubrey just still has soul read him.
No, because game recognizes game. I know I can look someone in the eyes and I know if they were a fat child. And Seth MacFarlane was a fat child. Me, Seth MacFarlane, Stephen King, I look at all of us and I see something.
Was Stephen King a fat child?
Oh, you know it.
Okay, I don't, Aubrey, this is not a superpower that I have. This is your superpower.
No, this is a fat person's superpower, is I can look at
Yes.
any person and I can know whether they were a fat child. And Seth MacFarland gives fat child energy.
Speaking of children, I don't think I've watched an episode of Family Guy since I was in high school, and maybe even earlier than that. And I did feel some shame at the idea of my roommates seeing me watch it and hearing the theme song coming from my room. That's for me to unpack. That's for me. That's for me to unpack.
You gotta let go of that.
I know. I also watched Family Guy in public in a cool Williamsburg coffee shop / bar surrounded by a bunch of cool Brooklyn people. And I can never leave the island of Manhattan again after that. That's I'm not allowed to leave Manhattan anymore. I have to stay where the finance bros are.
No, that's powerful energy. That's that's the energy I bring to the function.
I will say, when I was working at a coffee shop in Arizona during the pandemic, one of my femme coworkers loved Family Guy. So even though I do think genuinely the majority of Family Guy audience is men, sometimes the audience is 21-year-old women in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yes.
And Aubrey because she has a husband.
Sometimes it's for the girls.
And as I was doing some Googling about Family Guy, it's unlike Zootopia that had a bunch of scholarly articles written about like Judy Hopps being hot. It's actually not super easy to find commentary on male attractiveness in Family Guy, probably because the audience is largely straight men. There's a lot of articles about like how masculinity functions in Family Guy, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but there's also a streamer I love. I'm wearing his merch right now, in fact, and the least attracted I've ever been to him was when he was doing a bit about how all he thinks about is Family Guy. I will engage in straight man culture by watching a bunch of grown men play Minecraft, but I cannot engage in being a Family Guy enjoyer.
I'm a Family Guy enjoyer, so you know what? I am one of them. I'm with the boys here.
Boys night.
Boys night. We're gonna watch some Family Guy, get some LNS, and just hang out.
I don't know if abbreviating late night stack down to LNS is more or less millennial than when you said cool beans.
me and Josh. Oh, that's one of
or not cool beans. What did you say? What did you say? It wasn't cool beans.
I said awesome sauce.
There we go.
I did, and I'm gonna bear the shame of that for the rest of my life. But yeah, we do abbreviate some things. LNS is my favorite of the abbreviations, and it's become so integrated into my vernacular that I forget that other people do not refer to it as an LNS.
It's giving Jersey Shore gym tan laundry, which is why I think it makes me think millennial coded.
Maybe it is.
So what's up with attractiveness and Family Guy in general? I genuinely think, after watching all of these episodes, I did not watch every episode of Family Guy, I want to be very clear. That would be an insane thing for me to have done. I genuinely think in the world of Family Guy, attractive means thin, muscular, and able-bodied. I'll get more to when I talk about Joe, but basically every hot girl on the show is just skinny with big boobs, and hot men on the show are all just athletic guys. Mm-hmm. And so this episode in general is going to be about how attractiveness is defined in the Family Guy world for men. And then we will be doing another episode about how Family Guy establishes attractiveness for women. So the first episode I want to talk about, where we sort of get this definition of like hot meaning athletic in Family Guy for men, is season 2, episode 17. He's too sexy for his fat.
Is that where Peter gets liposuction?
Yeah, baby. It's where Peter gets liposuction.
I gotta look up what he looked like.
This is the plot of He's Too Sexy for His Fat. There's 2 different skinny Peters in this episode, to be very clear. Skinny Peter, skinny penis. There's 2 different skinny Peters in this episode. The episode opens. At the grocery store, a cop makes fun of Chris for being a fat kid. Brian catches fleas, spreading them to the family. Lois insists on calling the exterminators, who arrive armed and shoot up the house, forcing the family to stay in a hotel. At the hotel, Chris doesn't want to take his shirt off at the pool. Lois offers to help Chris go on a diet, and Peter helps him exercise. After a single week of no results for this teenage boy, Cleveland suggests liposuction. Chris decides to stick to his routine, but Peter gets liposuction and then undergoes extensive cosmetic surgery. So like I said, there's two skinny Peters in this episode. There's the one where he just gets a bunch of liposuction and he's just skinny and looks weird. And then there's when he goes back and gets a bunch more plastic surgery and is like jacked.
Yeah, I can see both images.
Great. Aubrey, any reactions to those images of Peter?
Skinny Peter without all the muscles is incredibly cursed. He looks like
Yes.
he looks like Gumby,
Mm-hmm.
but then muscular Peter he just looks like Fabio, but then with like the ball sack chin, so I also just like this implication that I thought that the ball sack chin was like a double chin because he's fat. So it's very funny that he retains the chin no matter what his weight is.
Lois also like specifically comments on his chin when he gets all of the cosmetic surgery. There's like a line where she's like, "Your defined chin." I can't do a Lois voice. Your defined chin. That's too old. Now skinny and muscular, Peter's ego skyrockets and he joins the Quahog's Beautiful People Club. The sign outside of which says "Fat people will be towed." And Peter ends up neglecting Chris and worsening his self-esteem. Despite Peter's behavior, Lois finds him attractive, but is upset when she sees how it's affecting Chris. Mm-hmm. This is a running theme in Family Guy that people will overlook people being mean, dumb, etc. if they have a hot body. Brian calls Lois a bad person for this in this episode, but he does the same shit in a later episode that we're going to talk about.
And I'm sure that they do not mention that at all because that would require an internal logic that Family Guy does not adhere to.
Correct. I also think we see, to provide my dramaturgical internal logic for it, Brian is a hypocrite, and that comes up over and over and over again throughout the show, and the rules for Lois and other characters are very different than the rules that Brian has for himself.
Yeah.
I do think it's important to note that for Lois, it is not enough when Peter becomes thin and is cursed skinny Peter. It is only after he becomes muscular that her, like, horniness for him increases, which is why I say that it's not about just thinness in Family Guy, meaning that you're hot. It's about this, like, very specific but also generalized, like, athletic, chiseled body type for men.
Well, yeah, it's that male ideal, right? Like, we think of like the mesomorphic ideal where men are, thin but then also muscular.
Aubrey, wow, do you want to define mesomorphic for everyone? I just had a flashback to AP psychology.
Oh, so when we talk about the mesomorphic ideal in body image stuff, when it comes to like men's body image, we just use that to describe men who are, like I think there's that idea of like what, like an ectomorph, an endomorph, and a mesomorph. I think the endomorph is the one where you're like broad but not necessarily like defined muscles. I think the ectomorph is like the like skinny one where you're like, like bean pole, it's hard for you to gain weight. And then mesomorph is that like sweet spot in the middle, right? Where you're like average build, but then you're thin but not too thin, and you're muscular but not necessarily like broad.
I remember we had to in a class, I think and I don't know if it was my AP psychology class or if it was a different science class, but I think we had to like write down which one our body type was, and that was damaging for me as a child who had body dysmorphia.
Yeah, I actually don't know the science of those body types specifically. It wouldn't surprise me if somebody was like, body types are more complex than just these three ideas, but as a framework, I think that that's typically what people, I don't know, I think culturally that's what we think about when it comes to body types,
right?
For men at least. Like for women, I think we get into the whole thing with like, are you diamond shaped or hourglass?
Are you pear shaped, apple shaped, reverse triangle? I think attractiveness is pretty simple in the world of Family Guy, but I'm gonna complicate it a little bit more by mostly talking about Joe, Brian, and unfortunately, a little bit about Quagmire.
Three characters who I don't think are meant to be attractive.
Joe and Brian are, in my opinion, written to be the most attractive men on Family Guy. In that, like we talked about earlier with Brian, it's like he's just like in a lot of ways the most grounded and normal out of all of the male protagonists on the show. Mm-hmm. And then Joe is like, I think specifically with the episode we're going to talk about, he is a good looking, attractive man who is in a wheelchair.
Yeah, like I think I agree with the point that Joe is probably the most conventionally attractive, because that's like his whole character, right? Is that it's like,
Yes.
I'm a perfect guy and I'm a cop and have a great family and blah blah blah, but I'm in a wheelchair.
And I want to say up top, it is not the opinion of this podcast that being disabled makes you less attractive, but Family Guy, the television program, started in 1999, and it was frankly not progressive of them to have a main character in a wheelchair, though the way they talk about Joe's disability in the show is fucked up and continues to be. I watched episodes that came out in like the late 2010s, and it's like still the way they talk about Joe's disability is like really, it sucks.
Disabled people can be hot, and yeah, I think that the thing with Joe is that it's like, when the show comes out, right, it's like, oh, like, we have this character in a wheelchair, and it's a way of like actually kind of like normalizing
Right.
disability in a way that I think a lot of people would be like, okay, not perfect, but hey, it's something, and that's not, something that's terrible. The problem is that it never actually develops or grows because it's Family Guy.
Exactly. It's clear that Joe's disability is partially used to justify why a man is good looking, accomplished, etc., as Joe would be friends with Peter, Cleveland, and Quagmire.
Yeah.
And this is part of when I started getting into a little bit of like the research of the scholarly research around attractiveness. In TVs and movies, when it comes to men with disabilities, they are either depicted as asexual or the sex is paid or sympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
I looked into whether Joe and Bonnie have sex, and this show has been on for so many years, and Joe's disability is so unclear that I could not find a real answer to that question. Part of the bit at the beginning of the show is that Bonnie is like perpetually pregnant.
Yeah.
But they also change where in Joe's body his paralysis starts several times throughout the show. So whether or not Joe and Bonnie have sex is unclear in the world of Family Guy, is what I'll say. There's lots of jokes about it, but it's unclear. It's unclear.
How do they change like the status of where the paralysis is? Is it like some depictions are like just his legs, others
Literally,
are like his
there are jokes about his dick working and his dick not working.
Okay, sure,
Which,
why not?
like that's like that's literally what I mean.
Okay, great.
So that's why it's so unclear, because it tends to be. I think Joe's disability is very undefined and is like convenient to whatever joke they're trying to write in that moment.
Yeah, it's just whatever's funny.
And if I'm wrong and some real Family Guy fan has figured this out, please let me know and I'll eat crow. But I tried, and I was like, because I was going to make the argument that like part of Joe's character is he's not portrayed in this like way that a lot of times we see men with disabilities get portrayed in media. But I can't, and I think that is still true. But I can't make the argument that like they don't desexualize him, because there are some in the episode we're going to talk about when he is able to walk again. There is a joke about him and Bonnie having sex again for the first time in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's unclear what's going on there.
Okay.
Joe is voiced by known hot man Patrick Warburton.
I love you, Patrick Warburton. Come on the podcast.
And knowing that did create some cognitive dissonance in watching the episode I'm going to talk about. Picturing Patrick Warburton screaming, "I want to talk about vagina!" in a recording booth was like, whoa. It was actually like hard to picture that.
I love him.
I love him too. Next, we're going to talk about season 6, episode 3, Believe It or Not, Joe's Walking on Air. This was the first Family Guy episode I watched after having not seen it in a very long time. And ooh boy, what a treat. It originally aired on October 7th, 2007. So this is about 6 years after the He's Too Sexy for His Fat episode. Mm-hmm. Or no, more than that, 7 years. This is the description from Hulu. Dr. Hartman performs a leg transplant on Joe, giving him the ability to walk. With
real surgery that you can get.
Oh yeah. With his newly acquired mobility, the once crippled police officer also gains a new, more aggressive personality. Quick aside on ableist language. Joe is often described in the show as crippled or handicapped, which are both terms. Crippled definitely is one that like the disability advocates are like, don't use that. Handicapped is one that people tend to be a little bit more on the fence about, but it still leans no. That is the language that they use to describe him on the show. So when we're quoting directly in the show, I might use that language, but when I'm talking about him, I will just use disabled. Okay, Episode opens. The amazing intro happens. The one thing I will give Family Guy is the intro to Family Guy is genuinely so good. The first joke in this episode is about a TV show called Dr. Terry Fabulous Homosexual Gynecologist, when a gay gynecologist looks at a woman's vagina and goes, ew. And I immediately had to take a break. I paused the episode and I went and did a lap around the block, and then I came back and powered through the rest of the episode.
Doesn't he say, ew, it looks like a sad old man?
That is exactly what he says. I love that that's in your brain, your mind palace, Aubrey.
Oh, because that what gave me an insecurity that my vagina looks like a sad old man.
Do you think your vagina looks like a sad old man?
I have been vagina shamed, not by ever a sexual partner, but by my mother. So, where I have what's known as a hanging labia, because sometimes vaginas have that. My mom told me that it was really gross, and she had me go to a doctor who was going to give me a vagioplasty, and my mom told me to tell the doctor that it hurt and that that would be able to give me a vagioplasty. So then my mom was taken out of the room, and the doctor was like, if I give you this, you will probably permanently lose sensation. And I was like, I don't think I want it, actually. And yeah, so then my mom would tell me to basically tuck my little labia in so that it doesn't look so revolting.
I have a friend who used to have a client who was a cosmetic gynecologist who did a lot of labiaplasties, and he always was like mad that they couldn't post the surgeries on Instagram for obvious reasons. That's a tangent. I also had a friend who worked at a plastic surgeon's office in Scottsdale, Arizona, and she went to a ton of labiaplasty surgeries while she was working there.
Yeah.
The very popular surgery.
And like, to be clear, some people do get them because of pain, but it's also often a cosmetic surgery solely.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, I've never had a sexual partner shame me for it, but my mom did. My mom did. And by the way, I went to this doctor to talk about this vagioplasty when I was like maybe 11.
Your vagina's barely even finished cooking at that point. I just had anxiety about the roast beef comparison because I feel like early 2000s media made a lot of a big deal about like roast beef looking vagina.
Yeah, which who cares?
I love Arby's.
They got
not even
meats.
That's not even a good joke for me to make because I can't even eat beef. I can't eat roast beef.
I love roast beef.
Pain and agony. Okay, back to Family Guy. There's also a Jack Black joke in the first 2 minutes of this episode. Call back
where
to
he's
the Funny Batman series.
Where he's the butler, right?
Yes, where he's the butler. And it also, I genuinely forgot that part of the format of Family Guy was all of these like cutaway jokes. And so I was very surprised. I like just forgot that was part of the format.
Yeah, no, it's the show is half cutaways.
Yes. So the whole first chunk of this episode is about them starting the Quahog's Men's Club. So I really thought I was watching the wrong episode for a while. And I was like, wait, on Hulu, it says it's the one about Joe being able to walk again. But this first 8 minutes of the episode is about them founding the Quahog's Men's Club. So I really thought it was wrong. Anyway, what happens is Lois, Bonnie, and Bernice, Cleveland's first girlfriend since his divorce with Loretta, show up at the Drunken Clam, the bar they all hang out at. Peter and his friends get annoyed. And by get annoyed, I mean Peter fantasizes about shooting himself with a gun, and then it shows it very explicitly, and I wasn't expecting that.
I remember that as well. I remember this episode vividly.
There's also a visual joke where Hitler juggles fish, and I did understand why when I looked the episode up on Google, if you look the episode up on Google, the like image it shows you on Google is a portrait of Hitler. And I was like, what? And it's because there's this joke about Hitler juggling fish in the episode.
Great.
It is established in this episode that Joe's credit score is less than 651. And that's important for us to know because that's a thing about him that's not attractive.
Worse than mine.
I'm a classist. At like 8 minutes into the episode, the women then crash the Quahog's Men's Club. Everyone's dancing, and Bonnie comes to sit with Joe, and he laments about how his disability makes him feel useless. And this whole beat is just crazy because it's this like incredibly solemn and serious moment about Joe feeling like he's holding his wife back because he's in a wheelchair. And that comes 60 seconds after Quagmire talking about an inside-out anus. And then it ends on a joke about the maids union.
Sure.
Sure. This beat then continues the next day with Joe still feeling guilty, and then for some reason he takes the garbage out using his hand shoes.
Yes.
I don't know what this joke is supposed to be besides ha ha ha, he can't walk.
Yeah, basically.
Great. Finally, we're going to the doctor's office. They go to the doctor's office, Peter's with him. Unclear why Peter is with him. I guess they're just having a boys' night at the doctor's office.
Yeah, because it's emotional support.
Yeah, with Peter and not his wife. The surgeon is doing a consult with Mayor McCheese because having a cheeseburger for a head is the same thing as having a disability.
Yes.
The doctor says he can do a leg transplant for Joe if he signs a waiver. And then there's a classic this type of show joke about how the doctor and Peter's father-in-law have the same voice because they're both voiced by Seth MacFarland.
Yes. They're like, yeah, I guess we've never been in the same room before. Huh.
Yeah, because like Peter's father-in-law just like walks into the room, whatever. They do some digital imaging where they go through the options of legs from the donors, which include regular legs, too small legs, sexy lady legs, black legs, and then like a mermaid and a horse because, of course, those are the options. Mm-hmm. This is a joke that made me laugh out loud in the coffee shop. I'll admit it. The obvious leg choice comes up on screen and Joe says, "Hey, what about those?" And the doctor says, "Good choice. Those are the only legs we have in stock that aren't hilarious." And that one did get a chuckle from my cold, pretentious heart.
Because it's funny.
Now, of course, because nothing can be good in this world, this is followed up by an insane racist joke about bullfrogs in Ethiopia being delighted to be eating flies off of a man.
Sad.
So they had me for a second and then they lost me immediately.
Sad.
After surgery, Joe is immediately able to walk because this is a cartoon.
Yeah.
Now that Joe has his legs back, he wants to do shit like go rock climbing and do karate. And his personality is like way more aggressive than normal. Joe is already pretty aggressive, so this is a high bar to hit. And he like beats the shit out of Peter Quagmire in Cleveland at the dojo.
Isn't this also where they do like a dance together?
Yes. After he beats the shit out of all of his friends, they go back to Peter's house, and there's a delightful little musical number because Seth MacFarlane loves a music moment.
I've heard that the Orville, his basically like Star Trek parody show, is actually really good. So yeah, I think that he's trying to do some real acting right now.
Real acting right now. Is Orville still on?
I think so. I feel like I just heard that it got another season.
This is like when I found out Superstore ran for like 9 seasons or 7 seasons.
The only person I ever knew who watched Superstore was my mom.
I watched it and it was funny, but I watched it after it already ended.
I'm trying to think, you know, do you ever feel like there's a show where you're the only person in the world who watched it?
Yes.
That's Josh with the show Bates Motel.
Oh, really? I know people who love Bates Motel.
Well, my husband's one of them.
I feel that way about Greek, the TV show on ABC Family.
Oh my god, I vaguely remember that.
I love Greek. It's like one of my favorite TV shows, quite genuinely. That Greek, actually, we could talk about Greek at some point because one of the men on Greek, I think, was instrumental in forming my taste in men, and I mean that as a negative.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
So we have a delightful little musical number. After the delightful little musical number, there is then an extended fat joke because it is 2007. It is surprising how many fat jokes there are on this show, given that like many of the protagonists are fat, and the jokes are almost never about the protagonist. They're about like other fat people.
I'm weirdly desensitized to fat jokes in media that I grew up with, but if it's new media to me, I'm very aware of it, and I'm like, ooh, that doesn't feel good. But Family Guy, for some reason, the fat jokes just like slide off of me. I think because I watched it when I was so young.
Yeah. I think in the previous episode, the one where Peter gets skinny, there's like a lazy river joke with a bunch of fat people.
Well, remember, there's an episode of Family Guy where Lois has a brother, and his thing is that he murders fat people.
I don't know about this.
No way.
I don't know about this.
Yeah, there's an episode of Family Guy where Lois's brother gets out of an asylum, and basically his thing is that he was in the asylum because he murders fat people because their mom had an affair with Jackie Gleason, and then he saw that when he was a kid, and then it just makes him want to murder fat guys. This is a plot because Peter also decides that he's gonna own being a fat guy, so he joins like the fat guy acceptance group, and there's obviously many very fat phobic jokes about that.
Tough, and I can't believe I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
So after all of this, Joe comes into the bar and reveals that he's made friends with cooler, hotter versions of the squad. Their names are Parker, Quentin, and Portland.
Of course.
And Cleveland goes, is Portland the black one? And Joe goes, yes, Portland is the black one. And Joe says to them, well, Peter, I realized over the last few days that the only reason I was friends with you guys is because I was crippled and you were lazy. I decided it's time I got some friends more suited to my status. Quagmire says, but Joe, we've been friends for years. And Joe says, we all make mistakes.
Oh, tough. Savage.
There's another pretty good joke about Judas and Pontius Pilate, so Seth can have 2 chuckles this episode. The other 3 guys try to make a new friend, but can't, so they decide they need to get Joe back. Peter goes to Joe's house to talk to him and find Joe in the middle of leaving an incredibly pregnant Bonnie. Peter decides they should re-disable Joe. And then the Hitler joke comes back. So the 3 men break into the house and try to beat up Joe. But he, of course, kicks the shit out of them. It's a very long fight sequence. I think that they were just flexing their animation skills, honestly, and trying to fill time.
Family Guy loved a long fight scene. That was the whole thing with the chicken.
I like the chicken fights. I like when they continuously escalate. I like the chicken. So then Bonnie shoots him multiple times, but she keeps missing. So then he shoots himself in the spine.
Well, as you do.
So now Joe is back in a wheelchair and everyone's friends again.
And that's the lesson about just accepting yourself for who you are.
If there is anything that makes Joe actually unattractive, it's not his disability. It's that he has anger issues and he's a cop. And the only thing worse than being attracted to a dog is being attracted to a cop, as we've established many times on this podcast.
Fair.
And that leads us into Brian. Brian is a dog, so he obviously cannot be a traditionally attractive man, but he is written largely as the straight man of the series.
Mm-hmm.
In the episode about Joe regaining the ability to walk, there's a whole part where Peter tries to get Brian to say bonerific, and they all point and laugh at him when he does, and Brian is like, what the fuck? And this points to a recurring theme of Brian seeing himself as more mature than Peter and his friends, and this is kind of true and part of the comedy, but also, I have dated some Brian-esque men, and I would argue that it's less more mature and more pretentious.
Yeah, because that's Brian's whole thing, right? Is that he's like, he's working on a novel that never comes to fruition, and his actual writing ability is not very good.
In one of the episodes, I think in the next episode we're going to talk about, there's like extended bits where Stewie is making jokes about Brian not being able to finish his novel, and they're so long. These jokes go on for like minutes, and they're not funny.
Well, it's because Seth MacFarlane's whole thing is that he thinks that pretentious people who talk about writing are the worst people to ever exist. And honestly, he's not wrong.
I guess I can only agree with that insofar as I'm at the point in like my theater career where a lot of people who being actors isn't working out, and they're turning to playwriting with a big what, like it's hard energy, and then they find out that it is in fact hard, that like being a playwright is an actual job and writing isn't just an easy thing that anyone can do, and then they're like, oh, I thought this would be easier than acting, and the answer is no.
No, acting is actually much easier than writing.
Aubrey's in a play right now.
I'm in a play, and I have an unfinished play that I've been working on. So, you know.
Because Aubrey's a part of the problem, actually. Throughout the series, Brian dates multiple human women, notably Jillian Russell, who he dates for most of season 5 and season 6. Their relationship ends over a conflict around moving in together, and when Brian tries to win her back, it is revealed she is now dating Adam West, who I forgot was the mayor of Quahog.
How do you forget this?
Because I forget, I have not watched Family Guy in probably 15 years.
I'll never forget. He was Mayor Adam West. He was Catman in Fairly Odd Parents.
Yes, I do. I remember him being Catman. I remember Adam West was in Family Guy. I just forgot he was the mayor of Quahog. Almost every description of Jillian is how dumb she is. But Aubrey, also, if you don't remember what Jillian looks like,
I remember.
Just such a regular, skinny, hot blonde woman with big boobs. Very much like the prototype of like what a hot woman in Family Guy looks like.
Well, because in Family Guy, everyone has like basically the same face. So, yes. Oh my god, is Jillian voiced by Drew Barrymore?
Yes.
Oh my god, I didn't know that. I just saw a picture of Drew Barrymore and Jillian, and I'm like, oh my god, alright, I guess that actually tracks. Like, the only thing that I think makes Jillian's face that much different from, like, Lois is they give her the woman eyelashes, and, I mean, they do give her actually a different face shape. Actually, you know what, I take it back. They do make Jillian look different than the other characters, in, I guess, a more conventionally attractive way.
The big difference with her and Lois is honestly the nose shape. She has like, there's sort of like two girl noses in Family Guy. And yeah. there's the Lois Griffin honker, and then there is like this like tiny petite little nose, which is what Jillian has.
She looks like Francine from American Dad.
Yes. And she also always has a choker on because she's dating Brian. And he's a dog, so he has a dog collar on. I know that that's an intentional design choice.
Hilarious. That's awesome. Yeah, and then she's not wearing it in later episodes. Interesting. Cute.
Like I said, almost every description of her is about how dumb she is. The episode that I watched with her in it was the episode where she is introduced, which is season 5, episode 5, Whistle While Your Wife Works. It's called that because technically I would say the B plot of this episode is Peter gets Lois to do his job for him. So Lois does his job while Peter just sort of hangs out in the office.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the episode is called that. But the plot we're talking about is that Brian is embarrassed to introduce Jillian to Stewie because she is dumb. And This is getting back to that thing that I was saying earlier where like Brian is a hypocrite because he is dating her because she is hot, despite the fact that they have like nothing in common, which is the thing that he basically criticizes Lois of doing with hot Peter in the earlier episode. But this is 3 seasons later, so everything's different.
Everything, the timeline resets every season.
Yeah. Jillian thinks Hitler is still alive. She thinks that lemons have to be killed to make lemonade. Brian
She's not wrong.
I had that thought too. I was like, she's not wrong, but they don't suffer, which she's like sad that they're suffering. Anyway. Brian has to she's like, it's so sad that they have to kill all these lemons to make the lemonade. And Stewie's like,
yeah.
Brian has to talk her through every step of watching a DVD, and she thinks that the capital of Rhode Island is Rhode Island City. Aubrey, what's the capital of Rhode Island?
Des Moines.
Now, they live in Rhode Island, so not knowing that Providence, Rhode Island is the capital of Rhode Island is a little bit worse if you live in Rhode Island.
Yeah, I definitely knew that. Knew that.
But I think, like, comparatively to some of the other things she does in the episode, roasting her for thinking the capital of Rhode Island is Rhode Island City is not. I think there are people who live in New York who don't realize that Albany is the capital of New York and not New York City.
Do you know the capital of Kentucky?
Is it Lexington?
No, it's Frankfurt, you fucking idiot.
Oh, really? Is it?
Yes, it's Frankfurt.
Oh, I did not know that one.
Yeah, I just was there recently for a protest.
What were you protesting?
Science in America.
You were protesting science? Aubrey, are you anti-science?
Yes, I am a science denier. We need to cut science funding immediately. Please fire me. Release me from this hell.
Aubrey wants her NIH grant to get slapped. Brian also lies to Jillian and tells her that he's a detective. So there's a lot of lying going on in this episode. But basically, the moral of this episode is all you have to do is be hot and nothing else matters. He goes to break up with her at the end of the episode. She's naked, so he doesn't break up with her. And he leaves Stewie alone in the car for several hours because he's a bad uncle, friend, a childhood dog. I don't really know what the Stewie-Brian relationship is.
I don't know. I would say they are friends, but then there are moments where I think that they do talk about like, oh, you're my childhood dog, and one day you'll die, and I'll be sad. So who knows?
There's, in one of these episodes, they show a teen Stewie, and that was cursed.
Oh yeah, where he has the long hair and he's like smoking weed.
Yes, I hated that.
I didn't like that either.
Brian also dates Jess Schlotz, a woman diagnosed with terminal cancer who Brian meets in a bar in season 17, episode 1, Married with Cancer. Brian wears a fedora in this episode. That was the first thing I thought it was noteworthy to mention.
I see this character and they show her skinny and they show her fat. Is that a spoiler?
It is a spoiler, Aubrey. Are you excited for the spoiler?
I mean, I do look like the fat version of her. I'm going to be completely honest.
In this episode, Stewie tells Brian he's a horn dog who's too old for the game. And I just have to ask, Seth, are you okay?
No, he's not. So Seth MacFarland has at one point been deeply in love with a friend's wife. And that's who he thought was the love of his life. And it has haunted him ever since.
Once again, this is an Aubrey soul read.
But that's the thing, Seth, if you're listening to this, you were in love with the idea of her. It would have never actually worked out, and even if she wanted you like that, it wouldn't have been the way you think it would have. Get over it.
Seth, if she wanted to, she would, but then you wouldn't. And so then we would just be, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could marry his friend's wife?
You just want to yearn. I understand. I'm addicted to the yearn as well.
This episode requires you to be really okay with watching Brian have sex.
Okay.
And that's tough for me, but maybe great for our furry fans out there. There's a really good joke about Peter not being able to throw a boomerang in this episode. This is a good joke about that. So they find out that Jess has like 2 weeks to live.
Okay.
And Brian proposes marriage to her. They get all this media attention where everyone's like, you're so selfless for doing this. And then when they're wedding dress shopping for her, he gets hit on by 2 women who were like, maybe when she's dead, we can be together. And he takes their phone numbers.
Not good.
Not good. So then they get married. And right after they get married, her doctor, who is not Dr. Hartman, by the way, a different doctor, is like, my first wedding gift to you both is to tell you that Jess isn't actually dying and her cancer's in remission. And Brian immediately panics. Then Jess gets fat and gassy, and Brian does not want to be married to her. He lets her die on a chip in a restaurant. She chokes on a tortilla chip in a restaurant. But then at the end of season 17, episode 1, it's revealed that she isn't actually dead. She like bursts out of the coffin and everyone's excited she's alive, except for Brian, who had hoped her dead.
I will say, marrying someone and then she becomes fat and gassy, you know, that is probably the story of my life. But
what?
Because remember, I got married and then immediately gained a bunch of weight and farted a lot.
That's not true.
yes, it is.
No, not.
You were there.
I don't want to push this narrative that you had a bunch of sudden weight gain after your marriage.
I did not. I probably am fatter now than before, but that's also because I moved and I was...
And you're not doing Krav Maga anymore.
I am no longer spending 6 hours a week doing high-intensity cardio.
Yeah. And I was like, this is like, I don't want people to think that this is a thing that you're going through.
I also don't fart a lot. I'm actually a bit constipated.
Did the cyst situation happen before or after you guys got married?
Before.
Oh, I was going to say, because actually you and Josh got married and your weight stayed the same, but you just developed an ovarian cyst, but it was before you got married.
No, that was my little son got removed from me.
And that's where that episode ends. So that's 17-1. And then
That's a two-parter.
It's a two-parter. So in the next episode, Dead Dog Walking, Brian is severely depressed. And so he gains a bunch of weight. If you want to look up what little fat Brian looks like, it's crazy.
My God. He looks so cute.
He
looks like Butters.
He gains a bunch of weight. He starts heavily drinking, and he ends up with hip dysplasia. So then Jess is sort of full-time taking care of him. He's gross. So then she takes him to the pound to be put down. She drops him off at the pound and like is going to have him put down.
It's fucked up.
Peter saves him from being put down. And Jess and Brian decide that maybe they are meant for each other and that marriage is just two people who want each other to die. And once again, I have to ask, Seth, are you okay?
He's not okay. Because marriage, you actually want your partner to live.
Yes.
Typically.
And then Jess dies during the final commercial break.
Sure.
And then we come back and they're having a funeral for her. Not even, they're like
Okay.
back from the funeral after her. And then Brian spreads her ashes. And that's how the episode ends.
Great.
So this leads me to Aubrey. If you would like to click on this link, this was a poll on Reddit about the hottest Family Guy character, and I would just love to get your initial reactions to it, and then I will give my initial reactions.
All right, we got who's the hottest Family Guy character? Let's see. 2,000 total votes. 728 are for Bonnie. That tracks. 540 are for Lois. 354 are for Liam Neeson, because sure. And then 189 Joe, 140 Peter, and 107 Quagmire. I mean, I guess this is probably what I would expect in terms of ranking.
I have to say, thank God that Quagmire got last in this poll, because I genuinely think if you're attracted to Quagmire, much how I feel about if you're attracted to Count Orlok from Nosferatu, you need to seek therapy. You need to talk to someone about that.
I also feel like those could have been just like the joke votes.
Yeah. Or
because when the third most voted person is Liam Neeson, I think everyone after that, they were not really voting seriously.
But Liam Neeson on Family Guy is hot.
I mean, Liam Neeson is hot.
But have you seen Liam Neeson on Family Guy?
Let me see. I mean, yeah, he does look really hot.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
Why does Liam Neeson on Family Guy look hotter than Liam Neeson in real life?
Well, because we also, I think in my brain, Liam Neeson, I only picture him when he's much older, and old people are ugly, as we all know. That's a joke. 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 I just think that like this is more drawn around like young Liam Neeson.
I guess, but maybe Liam Neeson is just a man who was meant to be animated because he looks fine.
Yeah, but like look. But now I'm just looking at pictures of Liam Neeson. Liam Neeson, I think, primed everyone to be attracted to Pedro Pascal. They have very similar faces.
I agree with that.
Liam Neeson walked so Pedro Pascal could run.
I find Liam Neeson more attractive than Pedro Pascal.
Oh, see, the rom-com with Pedro Pascal and Chris Evans is a movie that was made for me, Mackenna Goodrich.
I actually don't personally find Pedro Pascal to be all that attractive to me personally. I feel
You're a more contrarian, Aubrey.
I just feel more of a paternal connection to him. I feel as though he and I were once children together, walking through Papa's orchard, picking apples on a warm...
So wait, do you feel paternal to him, or do you feel fraternal towards him? Because you now say that you feel paternal to him, but then described yourself as walking through an orchard with him as a child.
Maybe paternal where he is my father.
Okay, great. I also think about this Reddit poll, it's interesting to not include Cleveland.
Well, because I think with this, right, was it probably... Oh, yeah, because I guess it was probably preset options rather than, like, people could write in and then vote, because that would just be...
But also, insane. No one wrote Cleveland? Racism.
I mean...
Racism.
That's just sounds about white.
Yeah. The winner was Bonnie. I did forget who Bonnie was because I did look at this poll before watching the Joe episode and I was like, who the fuck is Bonnie?
Fake fan.
That led me to this image, Aubrey, from an episode that I don't think you've seen that I'm sending to you now.
Oh my god, did Brian and Bonnie fuck?
Season 14, episode 16, The Heartbreak Dog. Number one, the visual quality. So I watched the
Why is this
episodes...
the most crisp screen cap I've ever seen in my life? I can zoom on this to like 400 times.
The episode that I watched these orders in was pretty much chronological through the seasons. And so I had watched the season 2 and the season 4 episode, or season 5 episodes that I watched. And then I watched this one. And when I watched this episode from season 14, the quality is like jarringly better. It's like wildly better.
Yeah, I mean, they got the money.
Yeah. So in The Heartbreak Dog, the neighbors celebrate Bonnie's 46th birthday. Joe shows a video of their honeymoon trip to Cabo when he was healthy. And then when they went back 10 years later after his injury, and basically the bit is it was fun when he was healthy and sucked when he was in a wheelchair.
Sad.
Just warning, this is going to be another episode that's really a little bit fucked up towards. This was the episode I watched that I was like, wow, even in season 14, we still aren't talking about Joe's disability in a good way.
What year was this season?
I believe this was 2015. Oh no, this episode came out in 2016 because season 14 went between 2015 and 2016, and this episode came out in 2016.
Okay.
Also, the season finale of this season is one about Brian falling in love with a tech support worker and them going to India. So that's the tone of the season, you know?
I mean, it's like, that's the thing. It's like early Family Guy, I think you can excuse it by being like, wow, like, you know, product of its time, blah, blah, blah. But then when it's like, oh, like, actually, we did know better at this point, you know?
Well, that's why, like, the one we were just talking about, the episode where Brian is married to Jess, to the woman who is terminally ill and then isn't. All that, her getting fat and gassy and being gross jokes, that's from season 17. So that would have been in 2018.
Yeah, that's just ugly.
I'm in college at that point, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're in the middle of the first Trump presidency. Remember that? Back to The Heartbreak Dog. Brian later finds Bonnie crying over how she has spent her life taking care of Joe. They basically commiserate over how Bonnie feels trapped by Joe and Brian feels trapped by being a pet. Brian comforts her, scratches her behind her ear, and calls her a good girl, and they kiss.
Okay.
The whole scene is like very aware that Brian is a dog, and then they kiss, and it's like, ah. Brian confides in Peter that this kiss happened and makes him promise to not tell anyone, but during a future game night, Peter reveals the kiss while playing charades, and there's again a bunch of jokes about Brian being a dog. It's funny, the reason why I say that is it's funny because in those other episodes, besides like him being taken to the pound to get put down in the episode with Jess, there's not a lot of jokes about Brian being a dog when it comes to his relationships with women, which I think is very intentional. And then in this episode, they're just like very much like Brian is a dog kissing a human woman, and that's what's happening here.
Yeah, like it's almost like I think the internal logic of Family Guy is like Brian's relationships outside of the main cast, he's functionally a person, but then interactions he's having with the main cast, he is a dog.
There's a part of the one where Joe is able to walk again where they get to keep Joe's old legs and they give them to Brian to chew on.
Of course.
Oh, I thought I had a note about this, but Brian mostly dates human women. There is one episode where he falls in love with like a sexy show dog. So there is an episode where he dates a dog or wants to date a dog. Brian apologizes for kissing Bonnie, but Joe pulls pranks in retaliation, including having Brian's car towed, drugging him, and filming him figuring out how to walk in boots because he's a dog and it's funny to watch dogs try to walk in shoes. Brian calls a meeting to resolve things, but the discussion only worsens the situation as everyone highlights Brian and Bonnie's flaws. Frustrated, Brian defends Bonnie and they impulsively decide to leave together. Proud of their decision, they soon run out of gas and are forced to work in a diner to earn money. They start to argue, but Bonnie gives Brian a reality check. Meanwhile, Joe tracks them down via a chip in Brian's ear and reconciles with Bonnie. There's like some weird commentary here about him not taking care of her, which like to me has less to do with him being in a wheelchair and more to do with his general personality and vibe.
Yeah.
This interaction ends with Joe shooting Brian in the foot.
Gun violence.
And this has nothing to do with the episode, but there's another joke in the episode that's another prolonged fat joke. And every episode of the show is the same. I'm in purgatory. I am Sisyphus.
We should also talk about how the voice of Bonnie is actress Jennifer Tilly, who is so sexy and hot, and most people probably know her from like The Bride of Chucky, but she's done a lot of stuff. She's absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, yeah, she's very pretty.
And I think a lot of people have like, because I noticed on the poll, some of the comments were like Bonnie because of the voice, because that's just like Jennifer Tilly's speaking voice is just that like really like just like
Oh, yes.
raspy,
It's
sexy.
very like, because it's what's interesting about her voice. I can't really do this because I'm sick. What's interesting about her voice is there's rasp to it, but it's still high pitched. Because
Hmm.
like I have to pitch my voice up to talk like Bonnie, but then it still has this very like back of the mouth feel. So she's
Hmm.
talking with rasp, but in a higher pitched tone, which is very unique.
Yeah, and she's also a bit older, I think. Like I think you'll be shocked at what her age is. Yeah, she's 66.
Good for her.
Yeah, but I also think that's part of the attraction to Bonnie is because she's voiced by Jennifer Tilly, who, especially a lot of like 90s nerd boys, have huge crushes on.
Yeah.
Because she was kind of proto goth GF.
Oh, was she?
Yeah, like look up like Jennifer Tilly 1990s. Like she was in a movie called Scorchers where she plays, I think, like a hot like
Oh,
kind of
she's like an early scream queen, girly pop.
yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, I mean she's just stunning. She has huge boobies.
Which is important
Yeah.
sometimes. So I think that like with Brian, there's a lot of like informed attractiveness because the show is constantly telling you that he is attractive to a lot of women.
Hmm.
And that brings us to the last episode I would like to talk about, which Aubrey, I know you've seen. This is season 4, episode 7, Brian the Bachelor.
Oh, when he goes on The Bachelor.
Correct? This episode is directed by Dan Povenmire, who created Phineas and Ferb.
Interesting.
Dan Povenmire worked on Family Guy for a long time before he like went and made Phineas and Ferb.
So did I forget her name, but the woman who did Gilmore Girls and
Alex.
Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
I have her name in the next episode description. Alex Borstein.
Yeah.
Also, when I was watching this episode on Hulu, I got a Sephora ad that is like explicitly about sex, and also the couple was a lesbian couple, so that was exciting.
No,
Still DEI in our
Amy-
Sephora commercials.
Amy Sherman Palladino is the one. She was the creator of Gilmore Girls, Bunheads, and Ms. Maisel, and she worked on Family Guy, or her husband did, I think.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I thought about her husband did. She didn't work on it.
Oh, okay.
Alex Borstein, who was on Gilmore Girls and was also on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, was a lead writer for Family Guy for a long time.
And isn't she the voice of Lois? Or no? Am I thinking of someone else? Yeah, no, she's Lois in Family Guy.
Oh, she's Lois. Yeah. She's Lois's family, and also Trisha Takanawa.
Of course.
In Brian the Bachelor, the episode starts with a "once you go black, you never go back" joke with Cleveland, and the woman he is hitting on is dating a burnt sienna crayon.
Yeah, I remember that.
I actually remember this episode, not for the Brian is the Bachelor plotline, but because this is the Chris talking pimple episode.
Oh, yeah.
I remembered Stewie has a JFK Jr. joke towards the beginning of the episode, and I remember Chris's talking pimple that is basically Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors.
Yes.
This episode implies that Peter is trans.
The fans have rolled with this.
I forgot about this entirely, but the joke about when he like gets bottom surgery, because it's like every boy remembers the day he became a man or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Peter is like, I remember the day I became a man, and it's him waking up from bottom surgery, and Dr. Hartman asks him, "What are you gonna call yourself?" And he's looking at his penis, and he goes, "Peter."
Yeah.
I also have to say at this juncture, the character I hate the most on Family Guy is the pedophile old man. And every time he's on my screen, I want to not be watching this show.
It's such an uncomfortable joke that I remember when I was a kid, like middle school boys thought was so fucking funny. Yep. But it's one that I'm going to be honest, I never found funny. Nope. And it is still not funny.
And I know that they've like largely gotten rid of that character, and like that is a joke that like they have taken the note on that like it's not funny and like have stopped doing that bit.
Yeah.
They've also like significantly decreased with the Quagmire stuff, which is also good because as we're going to get into this episode, the Quagmire stuff was crazy.
Yeah, well, they basically rewrote Quagmire, I think, where, like, in more recent episodes of Family Guy, I think Quagmire's bit is more like he's just, like, a guy who hates Brian.
Yes.
Like,
That is like the running joke with Quagmire that he hates Brian.
yeah, like, and I think that's where they basically turn his character from. It's a little bit of an inversion of the two characters because, like, Quagmire is like a sex pest, and Brian is like normal guy at the beginning, and then as the series develops, it becomes more like Quagmire becomes the more grounded one who calls out Brian's hypocrisy, and then Brian
Right.
becomes more of the bad guy, which I think is
Yeah.
fascinating.
Seth's aging
Yeah,
and the self-hatred is growing.
he's growing.
The context is that The Bachelor is coming to Quahog for auditions, and Peter takes Cleveland, who was recently divorced from his wife. Brian thinks The Bachelorette sucks, but comes with them for some reason, a trend in this show. In the waiting room, Cleveland starts to freak out. So Peter tries to calm him down, and so he ties him to a chair, and then they end up naked. The producers walk out into the waiting room and see the naked Peter and Cleveland. So Brian goes into the producers to apologize, and they end up casting him on the show. This is the episode where there's the way too long bit about Stewie negging Brian about his unfinished novel. It is both a joke in the middle of the show, and it's how the episode ends, and it's not funny either time.
I actually kind of think it's funny, like it's just
Too
still working on that novel,
long.
still working on that novel. How's
It's
that novel
so
coming along? I don't know.
But if it went on for 30 seconds, I think I would find it tolerable. It's just for 90 seconds being like, still building plot and character, still bringing it up to the climax, and it's like we're beating the joke into the. It's like more.
Family Guy loves to do that thing where they do a joke and then they keep doing it until it's not funny, but then they try to extend it so that it will become funny again. And sometimes it does. Most of the time, it does not.
Ugh. All of the other guys cast in the show are hot and dumb, except also Quagmire, who begged to be on the show and gets to be because the casting director had him check his room for monsters.
Yes.
The setup being that he was going to make him have sex with him, but subversion, he wants someone to check under the bed for monsters.
Yeah.
There's also a joke about Frankenberry and supposedly Count Chocula being on this show, except for they're not present for the rose ceremony, so I think it was just a dumb joke about Count Chocula being a minority.
Yeah, I think that's it was more of just a cutaway in theory, but not canon.
Aubrey, I have a question.
Yeah.
Are Frankenberry and Count Chocula hot?
Let me look up all those cereal guys. So we got Frankenberry. Let's see. So we've got Count Chocula. Definitely, I'll say that I think Count Chocula has an allure, but I think Booberry, I don't know. There's something about Booberry that seems a little sweet. And then there's Fruit Brute, which I'm like, that's new. I've never heard of Fruit Brute in my life.
Oh. What is that?
He's
How
a
do you
werewolf.
spell that?
It's FRUTE. I saw it this year, and then I was like, "What the fuck is this?"
Oh. No, this is old.
Is it?
This is like, he's like extremely old.
Is it? I swear I saw it this year.
No, I think they brought him back.
Oh,
But he's like extremely old.
It makes sense, because when have we heard somebody referred to as a brute in?
Because the original 5 were Frankenberry, Booberry, Count Chocula, Fruit Brute, and Yummy Mummy.
Yummy Mummy. Let's see what Yummy Mummy looks like.
He looks like a mummy. You'll be shocked to hear he looks like a mummy.
What? I think Count Chocula has an allure, but Booberry, I don't know. I want to know more about.
He's just a little
Booberry.
Guy.
Yeah. I want to know more. I like his little hat.
Booberry might be a little bit gender for me.
Yeah, Booberry seems chill.
I will also say at this juncture, and I know I've said it before, I hate Quagmire in the early seasons of Family Guy. I have a really hard time with bits involving him. In the scene where they're meeting Brooke the Bachelorette, he keeps saying giggity, and it's implied he's jerking off.
Yeah. The scenes where Quagmire is like actively raping someone or assaulting or harassing someone bad, like that's the thing. I actually think that as the series goes on, Quagmire becomes a funnier character when his thing isn't being a sex pest anymore.
Yes. Yes.
Like the
It's
episode where fucking Quagmire has the niece who has cancer, and then Brian runs into them at the mall, and then Brian is like an
Oh,
asshole to
yeah.
them, and Quagmire's like, and Brian's like, I'm sorry, I didn't know she was dying. And Quagmire's like, who said she was dying? And the little girl is like, Uncle Glenn, am I gonna die? And like, that is so fucking funny, and it has nothing to do, like, that's the thing, like, when they basically rewrite Quagmire to just be an enemy of Brian, very
Yeah.
funny.
I spiraled for way too long about whether or not the show wants us to believe that Quagmire is hot.
No.
I feel like the answer is no, based on the Joe episode and also his sort of general vibe.
Yeah.
His whole thing is having sex with a lot of women, although most of them are sex workers and a lot of them aren't consensual.
Yeah.
And the answer probably is that male attractiveness is just not super investigated on this show. Quagmire and Brian make it past the first rose ceremony. Brian refuses to go on the first group date because they give him a donkey to ride. Brooke sneaks off because she's annoyed by the whole thing, and they smoke a cigarette together, and she reveals that she likes jazz, just like Brian. So he falls in love with her, and Brian sings about it because Seth loves to sing.
Yeah. She's not like other girls.
On a solo date, Quagmire roofies Brooke.
Yeah.
And then remembers there are cameras as he is taking her to a room to assault her. And then he still takes her sandal and loudly sniffs it. I hate this character.
Yeah.
This also made me spiral about whether or not I'm supposed to think that Quagmire is attractive. Because it comes down to Quagmire and Brian.
But
They're the final two Bachelorette contestants.
That's just played for laughs. So I really don't think that we're supposed to find Quagmire attractive. I think even just how he's depicted is like he's drawn as like a scrawny weirdo.
Yes. Brooke has an insane dinner at the Griffin house because I mentioned there's this whole thing going on with Chris's pimple telling him to do bad things, and that like comes to a head at this dinner while Brooke is there. But she has a worse time at Quagmire's, and she chooses Brian at the end of the show. And if you're wondering how could she have had a worse time at Quagmire's, there is an implication that Quagmire has sex with his mom.
Yeah.
Or at least wanted to have a threesome with Brooke and his mom.
Yeah.
As soon as the cameras wrap, she's like, good luck, Brian. And when he's like, wait, what about us? She thinks he's kidding and is like, oh, stop it. It's just TV. He ends up leaving her a million voicemails and then shows up at her house to sing her a song, Seth. And then she throws a phone at him.
Yeah.
I want to be able to make the point that Brian being on The Bachelorette and winning The Bachelorette establishes him as hot. But since Quagmire gets second, I don't think I can do that. But Brian does get cast on the show for real. Like, he does, like, walk into the audition room and get cast, whereas Quagmire cheats his way onto the show.
Yeah.
So, as I've mentioned, my whole thing is I think that Brian is ultimately just Seth's self-insert character. Good evidence for this is MacFarland uses his regular speaking voice for Brian. There's no affect to the voice that he uses for Brian. Brian is an aspiring but struggling writer. This is said to be a reference to Snoopy from the Peanuts, but it's also reflective of a younger MacFarland before he was able to, become the Family Guy guy.
Yeah.
From a 2004 Daily Princetonian article, as Family Guy, this is a quote, as Family Guy has grown in popularity, it has, according to MacFarland, inevitably affected his personal life. MacFarland is unmarried and not seriously attached, and said it can be difficult to discern people's intentions. He tries to keep dating as normal as possible and has been successful. And then, Aubrey, I have a direct quote from Setho for you to read.
Okay. I have some Brian type issues from time to time, looking for the right person, but I date as much as the next guy.
Self-insert character.
Yeah.
Also important to note that Seth MacFarlane is still not married and then never has been married and hasn't really ever publicly, dated anyone.
I thought he dated Amelia Clark.
What?
I swear to God, I think he dated Amelia Clark from Game of Thrones.
Oh, he was. That's the only public relationship he's been in.
Yeah.
Oh. I guess they're not, I was going to say they're not that dissimilar in age, but they're pretty, they're 13 years apart.
Well.
She was in her early 20s when they were dating.
Well, but they dated for several years, I think, right?
They dated
A
for 2
year.
years.
Okay, yeah.
They dated for a year. Listen, every man in Hollywood, I guess, gets to date one girl in her early 20s when they're in their mid 40s.
Yeah, because now Seth MacFarlane is. You know what though? With Seth MacFarlane, it wouldn't actually surprise me if Seth MacFarlane has like been married for like 5 or 6 years and has just been private about it.
Yeah.
That wouldn't surprise me.
I ultimately think Brian is written to be attractive to women, but kind of a flop and a fuck up. And I'd love to psychoanalyze Seth MacFarlane to his face about this one day.
Yeah.
And I would like to end on Seth MacFarlane was supposed to be in one of the planes that was hijacked on 9/11, and that's real.
Yeah, no, I thought this was common knowledge. He's talked about it before. There's even a Family Guy joke about it because I think he gets asked about it like a lot. But yeah, he was supposed to be in one of the 9/11 planes and he was not.
For those who don't know, he gave a speech at his alma mater, the Rhode Island School of Design, on September 10th, 2001. The next morning, he was scheduled to return to Los Angeles on American Airlines Flight 11. And due to a hangover and an incorrect departure time, he arrived at Logan International Airport 10 minutes too late to board the flight. So he was 10 minutes off from being on the plane. The plane that he was on is the one that was crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, which everyone who was on that plane died. Every single person who's on that plane died. It is the episode where a joke is made about it is in the episode where Brian becomes smitten with the female show dog.
Come on.
That's the episode where the joke is made is on the it's on the season 16 episode Boy Dog Meets Girl Dog, and that's where the joke about it happens.
What is the joke that they make?
I don't know. I didn't watch that episode. I had already watched too much Family Guy. Let's look. After Stewie makes a 9/11 joke, Brian says he was supposed to be on one of the planes, and Stewie replies that he was supposed to be as well. Yeah.
Because Seth MacFarlane voices both characters. Hee hee ha ha.
Ha 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 ha. Also, the dog, you should look up Ellie the show dog.
I did.
Okay, what do you think of Ellie the show dog?
I mean, she's cute.
It's kind of, I was kind of surprised. But, like, she's sort of Brian's type. Like, she looks like all the women who he dates.
Yeah, like, she's just, like, a cute girl dog. I mean, I'm glad they don't, like, give her, like, weird boobs or anything like that. I mean,
Did you kind of give her the Lola Bunny bangs, though?
Yeah, they give her the bangs, and then her ears basically look like little pigtails. Like, she's very clearly, like, a girl, but, like, still very much a dog.
Well, that's sort of how I feel about the men on Family Guy. Next week, we will turn to the women on Family Guy, primarily Lois and Meg, because I find that situation completely confusing as someone who does not have a lot of nostalgia for this show. Aubrey, any final thoughts on the boys in Family Guy?
I think that the men in Family Guy are so far removed from, like, physical attractiveness that it's purposeful, and I think resonates with the ways that men in general think that they don't care about their appearance at all, but then they do a lot, which is why you have so many jokes about appearance in Family Guy.
Aubrey?
Yeah?
If you had to be in a forced marriage with a Family Guy man, who would you be in a forced marriage with?
Weirdly, I think that my go-to answer, because I'm just in love with Seth Green, is actually probably Chris. But that's mainly because I fucking love Seth Green so much, and I think Chris as a character basically never develops.
Yes.
Like it's actually interesting how there's like no development whatsoever with Chris. So it's basically just a guy.
There's an episode of Family Guy recently where Glenn Powell plays a guy in the Quahog annual pumpkin contest, and Glenn Powell's Pumpkin Man really does it for me.
I just looked him up, and that's a weirdly sexual pumpkin man.
The pumpkin guy, his big pumpkin belt buckle and his little pumpkin glasses and his little loafers really do it for me.
Why is he so attractive? That the other thing too that I don't like with Family Guy characters is like when they have celebrities come in and do guest voices, they don't make them like ever be unattractive or bad anymore. Like I randomly watched the episode that had fucking like Rob Gronkowski, and it was just like, I'm Rob Gronkowski and I'm such a cool great guy, and I was like, this episode fucking sucks because it was just a commercial for Rob Gronkowski. And literally the entire episode was just everyone being like, isn't he so cool and great?
Millennial men love Rob Gronkowski. I guess Seth MacFarlane's not a millennial. Oh,
He's 50.
Gen X men love Rob Gronkowski.
I guess so. The universe is trying to tell me that, yo, you know what answer is fucking when they do I think it's like a single cutaway, but there's a cutaway where they do House on Family Guy, and the Family Guy version of House looks super hot. But I also think Hugh Laurie is just hot in general. So, you know what? That's my real answer is the one cutaway joke of Hugh Laurie as House.
House is a TV show that it makes perfect sense that all of those women want to have sex with House.
Yeah, I do. Why was I like 12 and I was like lusting for House?
Have a question or a topic that you would like for us to discuss? Send us an email at informedattraction@gmail.com.